Hi, my name is Troels from VAP, and in this video we're going to take a look at our Extreme Ensembles Analog Synth Edition. And essentially what we are looking at right now is 10 analog synthesizers all placed in an orchestral hall in an array and played together as an ensemble. And the end result is rather extraordinary. I almost want to say this is like the first library that would ever make Hans Zimmer cry, because we've taken the ensemble concept and just pushed it even further. And the funny thing about this is that when you play a synthesizer normally, it will have a very static wave, hence the synthesis. It can be a sine wave or a triangle. You can see some of the sort of chord waveforms here. But when they're played together and they're played in an acoustic hall, something magical happens. And the best way to describe it is almost like analog on steroids or human synth hormone or something like that. Like something just magical happens. I'll explain a bunch more, but let me just give you a little example here, playing our short notes with sine waves. So essentially, when we did this library, we decided to record it in the same fashion as we do with a normal orchestra. So we have short notes with round robin repetition on them, so they actually react different per note. So even when you repeat the same note, it will never sound the same, and particularly because there's 10 synthesizers playing at the same time. Let me just give you a quick glimpse here with the sine waves. Yep, that's 10 analog synthesizers playing short sine waves together in a hall. And of course, there are many things you can do with the library. In this video here, I'm only demonstrating our main microphone positions. We actually have 5 different ones. We have our mix, deca, far, wide, and close. And what you just heard right now was the mixed microphone position. But let me also preface that we have another video where I'm demonstrating all the spot microphones for the synthesizer ensemble. So in essence, all our Extreme Ensemble series were done with 10-piece ensembles. We have a 10-piece acoustic drum kit ensemble. We have a 10-piece synth ensemble, which I'm demonstrating in this video here using the hall mics. We also have a 10-piece electric guitar ensemble and a 10-piece electric bass ensemble, both played with amplifiers and without amplifiers. And then we also have our beautiful 10-piece drum machine kit as well. And everything is recorded the same way. You essentially have the 5 microphones here for our hall, and in addition we have 10 spot mics, one for each player. And I'll demonstrate that in a separate video, because over half of this library is really the spot mics. There's so much you can do by isolating individual players. You can create your own ensembles by doing it, like say you want to combine player number 1 and 6 and 8. You can really do some really unique things, and it has a much more close sound. But in this video here, I'm only going to be focusing here on our hall mics, and then I highly encourage you to watch the other video with the synthesizer ensemble demonstrating the beautiful spot mics and just how many things you can do with them. It's absolutely crazy. But let's try to continue here. Let me play you another of our sine wave presets. The library comes with a bunch of presets as well. This one is called Sines Forever, and you'll notice why. Let me try another little experiment here. This one is a little larger sounding. You can see I'm combining both the close and the wide microphone together. And in this case, I have this shimmering effect on it. And it's actually done by using our transform down here. We've expanded notably on our first more experimental sound design convolution reverb here. And it actually allows you to create these convolution-based delays. So not only do you have the stereo delay up here, but you can actually create delays of convolution inside of the sound, and it's awesome for creating these sort of otherworldly delay textures on top of your normal delay. All right, let's try something else here. I'm going to move on to our triangles. As you can see, we recorded some of the basic waveforms, and just wait, there's a bunch of different patches in the library and presets, but we started by recording the most core presets. You have sine waves, triangles, saws, and squares. And obviously when you use our spot mics in these, you actually have 10 different types of sine waves, 10 different triangles, and so forth. So you can really go in and find the individual ones, and it's really interesting actually when you go in and listen to them, how many interpretations you can have of what a sine wave or a triangle actually sounds like. It's almost disturbingly different, and though they have the same sort of visual character, they do sound rather different. Yeah, let's try and play with the short triangles here. And again, this is also using a round robin fashion, so you have that natural variation on the notes. And as you can probably hear, they have a really beefy sound. Let's try to go in and look at the module here. So obviously you have your control surface here. You can control the response. That's the velocity responsiveness of your controller. You have filter controls here. You can actually assign both high and low pass filters to your setup. You can also use sample offset if you want to shorten the sound. For example, if it's short and make it super tight, you can dial in the offset here and go in and make the sound even tighter. Obviously, we got stuff like ADSR and so forth as well. But let's take a little closer look at the microphones. You can see right now it was playing with the mixed. Let me just try to play a couple of notes with the different mics so you can hear the difference between the different microphone positions here on our triangle ensemble. So you can hear in that close one, it has a much more funky, tight sound. Let me move on here and show you another cool feature about the library. So you can actually mix any sound wave you want. If you click up here on this change symbol, it's going to highlight in white, and you can actually activate it and assign as many of these guys as you want together. Right now we're going to take a listen to what it sounds like when you combine the triangle and the sine wave ensemble together. So you can hear a much tighter sound than what we heard before. And the reason is on this one, I'm using the offset button here and I dial it all the way up. So we're sort of going into the sample. Let's say that your sample would normally start here and it would end over here. All of a sudden we're in here right now using the offset feature. So it really allows you to go into the sound. And I've also dialed down the release trigger here to make it even more tight. And if you look at the close mics here, you can see they're activated as well. So we have a more narrow microphone position. Really, really awesome. Let me also show you our arpeggiator here. We made a custom arpeggiation system for our entire Extreme Ensembles, and it's just awesome, super easy to use. Just click down here and activate it. You can control the rate, the swing, how many octaves you want to repeat, and how many times you want things to repeat. And of course, you can sculpt things here as well. And on many of our instruments, we actually have velocity-based recordings as well. So it's not just an arpeggiator, but it also triggers velocity layers if you do that. And down here, you can control all the different arpeggiation patterns. So let's try right now a combination of triangles, sine waves, and square waves in arpeggiation. So obviously that does not sound like a normal synthesizer just arpeggiating. You can hear that sounds how they're alive, and in part it's because we did round robin on these different ones here, but it's also just a whole. There's a liveliness to these synthesizers. It's almost like they become acoustic instruments because of the hall and everything going on. It's almost like they sound like acoustic instruments because of the hall and all the complexities of hall environments with air molecules being pushed around all the time, air pressure, subtle changes in the room, how all the microphone positions are picking up the sounds at different times and all that. It's an enormous amount of complexity, and it just creates this super lively instrument. Let me just turn the ARP off here and play a little with the same patch here. So that was the same patch, you know, just with and without arpeggiation. Let me try another test here with the triangles. In this case, I'm only going to use the triangles. I've off-clicked the chain link up here, so we're only going to be playing with the triangle ensemble. But in this case, I'm using some of our, you can see all the effects are actually activated. We added both phaser and flanger to this particular module here. And I'm also using our textural convolution delay down here. So this sound is sort of more alive, has sort of a robotic aftertone to it. All right, let's take a closer look at our saw ensemble. It's kind of funny saying that. This one is extremely powerful and it goes really, really tight with epic music. Essentially, you have the symphonic equivalent of a really strong fortissimo string section just played with synthesizers. And yeah, let me just play it. And just to give an example here, let me just try to play something very quickly. I'm going to combine it with our 8W string and brass section as well. So you're going to hear a 100-piece string section, a 60-piece brass section, and a 10-piece analog synth ensemble playing saw waves. A little bit crazy. So the synths are great because they give a more of sort of edgy kind of sound, particularly on the top, and give a little more body to the orchestra. Let me just play here a couple of notes without and with the synthesizer. Let's try the orchestra without. And with the synthesizer. Let me just try a quick other experiment here. I'll be playing the orchestra to start with, and then I'll add a little bit of the saw waves. You can definitely hear when the synthesizers start kicking in as well. And I'm telling you, and it's hard to describe in words, once you have all this together, all the ensembles from our Extreme Ensemble series, our 8W and our Imperium choirs together, you have the most epic set of samples I think ever created. At least I haven't heard of anything close to it in terms of its bigness, largesse, and epicness. But what I also think is wonderful, and particularly about the Extreme Ensemble series here, and you can see that on the spot mic videos, is that you can really go and make much more local and tiny, beautiful sounds. It doesn't always have to be big and crazy. Let me try another one here. Let's try to play the saw ensemble here and combine it with a triangle ensemble and then arpeggiate it. Isn't it great? And I think this is a good example where you sort of hit like a little bit in between epic and normal synthesizers, but you can definitely hear there's more going on than just the normal synthesis. Let's try another experiment here where I'm combining both sine waves, saw waves, and square waves together. And obviously, you can also adjust the volume up here. So if you want something to be a little higher in the mix than the other guys, you can do that. It's just dialing in here. There is no end to this madness. And speaking of that, let's try to go down and listen to our short note square ensemble. You can definitely get your EDM going as well. Let's try another one here. This one is going to be a little more like spacious. Again, if you go in here and look at the different effects, you can see down here on the reverb, there's something called Wonder, which is a large reverb. So I call these squares in space. And for this one, if you look at the microphone positions here, you can see I'm using the close. And they're great. If you want to get your EDM thing going, particularly with the ensembles and not the spot mics here, it's definitely a good idea to use the shorts. These guys over here, the white far deck and mixed, are better for orchestral epic stuff. You really need that big sound. I'll demonstrate a little later. For example, if you use our sustains on some of the notes, particular ones where we have amplifiers, we have actually recorded with both with and without amplification and distortion. Some of them are mega horns by themselves. When the whole ensemble is just playing, you don't really need any hybrid tools. It's already in the library here. Let me show you another patch here, also using square waves. In this case, I'm combining with the triangles, and you can sort of hear the difference if I'm just playing something right now. How much the far mic can actually impact the sound here as well. So yeah, let me just play a little with it. And as you probably noticed, there's this kind of swoopiness to the sound. If you click here on the main page here, you can see that I dial up the attack a little bit from being very strong, and then so you get more of that whoop kind of thing. And of course, if you ever want like a really, really tight sound, you essentially just go on the offset here, make sure the attack is down, and you can also dial down the release trigger here, and then you're in ultra tight world. Next up is our magical sustains. Obviously, we both recorded short notes, sustains, pats, sweeps, effects, for all the main mics and the spot mics as well. So I'm just going to go through and try to demo the sine wave, sustains, triangle, saw, square. And then we also have amplified versions where we had big amps. Each of the synthesizers had an amp in the hall. So we also recorded the amp signal for the sine and the saw ensembles. So you can get a really beefy sound, especially when you start combining them. But let me just start out by playing just a little bit here. With a solo inspired patch, you can see here right now, I've actually taken the glide and moved it up here, which puts the synthesizer in monophonic mode. And the glide here will define how long it takes to glide up to given notes. This is great for if you want to create more solo-like instruments. And that sort of more expressive mode where it goes like wow, that's actually just me moving the mod wheel here. You can see it here up and down, and it's sort of really great. It's using a high pass filter right now, and you can actually control the filter type by clicking this little guy here. And I have the high pass right now. It's really great for expression. But let's take a look at the same sine wave sustain ensemble here, but from a very different point of view. Let's take a look at the microphone positions. You can see right now it's only using the far. And to me, this sounds like a church organ. One of the really interesting aspects about sample organs, clarinets, and sort of pipe-related instruments is that when you look at the waveforms, they look somewhat static, but there's always something going on in them. There's actually a little more, and they're insanely hard to loop. If you ever want to like challenge yourself with looping, try to just loop a church organ. But let me try to play the sine wave right here, and just check out how churchy it sounds. You're listening to 10 analog synthesizers in a massive hall playing sine waves, and it sort of ends up like sounding like a pipe organ. And you can really feel that churchy kind of things also on the low notes here. Let me just try. That is definitely some meaty sine waves. And as you can hear in the end, when you just hold down the sustain note here, that there's such variation in the tone, constant variation in the note here. And that's just the air, all the instruments just being pushed around and creating that more lively texture. So it morphs from being just a static sine wave to becoming something much more expressive. And speaking of expressiveness, let me try another patch here, also using sine waves. And as you can hear, that had a much more local sound, and that's simply due to the microphones. In this particular patch, I'm using closed and white microphones, but for the churchy one, I'm using the far microphones to generate that sort of bigger, larger sound. But isn't it cool? Like, you're just listening to sine wave ensembles, super expressive, almost like a little bit of accordion-like. Let's try another one here. This time around, we're going to go down to our triangles, and this is our triangle sustains playing sort of in an expressive fashion as well. So rich, so full of life, and at the crux of it, that's really the biggest surprise with the Extreme Ensemble series when we recorded them. Like, okay, what's going to happen when we venture into the woods where nobody's ever been before? What's going to come out of it? And to me, the end result, and it's really audible here with the synthesizers, is that it's just expressive, it's alive, you can feel it. It does not sound like a synthesizer, and it doesn't sound like an acoustic instrument either. It's somewhere in between. Let me show you another patch here, also using the triangles. And in this case, they're also combined with the sine waves. You're going to hear an arpeggiation being played with this particular patch here. And then I'll be using the one we listened to before, the sine wave expression, just as a solo on top of it. So a combination between arpeggiation here with triangles and sine waves, and then using the sine wave solo synth on top of that. And it's funny how many things you can do with the waves. Let me give you another example here as well. This is just using the triangle sustain ensemble on its own. And in this case, it really reminded me about an accordion. It sort of has a very accordion-like quality to it. Check it out. And I was also playing a little around with the filter and the mod wheel here, just to give it a little more expression as well. And one thing for me, if you ever want to play sort of accordion samples and make them sound more alive, try to play them with a sort of tight note. Don't sustain too much. Right now my fingers just running very quickly over the keyboard in a sort of very short spiccato-like fashion as well. It just gives a sort of accordion feel to it. Next up here is our saws, and on this first patch here, I just want to show you a little bit about the power of the saw ensemble, combining both the saw sustains and the saw amplifiers, so you have 20 saws per note right now. So definitely some meat and potatoes and maybe a little bit of gravy as well. Let's move on here. Let me try to show you another one here, combining our triangle and saw sustains together. A lot of things you can do. And again, all the presets in this library, and there's a lot of them, are created by combining microphone positions here, using the front panel here. There's so many small things you can do. And of course, also going down here to Arceus Effects. In this example, I'm using both the phaser and the flanger. It just creates a little more variation in the sound. I also like to take the EQ a little high and just get a little tad up here, just get a little more bite and presence to the sound. Isn't that nasty and wonderful? I wonder if there's a word combining nasty and wonderful at the same time. I used the degrader on this one. You can probably hear a little bit of the bit resolution in the tail end of the wave here, but really, really beefy. And speaking about something where you might get a little too many calories, let's take a look here at another one of our sustain presets. This one is combining our saw, square, and saw amplified ensemble together. And the best way to describe this one is that if you remember our mega horns from our Hybrid Tool series, this is essentially just that, completely playable. It's that big, and I've never in my life heard anything done with synthesizers that remotely comes close to the beefiness of this. So yeah, just gonna play something super simple, but just check out the raw, universe-defying sound in this particular combo here. In some ways, I'm so glad that this was not released in the 80s. We would have had some nasty synthesizer anthems completely overdone. Let's take a look here at the square ensemble here. Isn't that just pure synthetic love, if you will? Let's take a look here in the next one here. I call this one fat squares. I was just trying to create a square sound that had more fattiness to it. So you can see I'm adding a little bit of the sine waves. And if you look here at the Arceus Effects as well, you can see I'm using our textural convolution delay here combined with a delay. And it just gives a really beautiful wide open tone to it. As I mentioned earlier, one of the unique aspects of the library is that we also used amplifiers for some of the synthesizer parts here. And in this case, you're going to hear the synthesizer ensemble play sine waves, but amplified. So we have big amplifiers in the hall, and you can definitely hear when the sound is getting burst out here, and you can see all 4 microphones is activated on this particular patch, that it has a more sizable sound. So we're sort of back to that alien, otherworldly kind of organ sound. The best way? Yeah, let's just listen. And anytime you hear those fade outs with the filters, that's just me playing with the mod wheel. All the patches you've been hearing actually has filters associated to the mod wheel. It's just that lends itself sort of to the synthesizer paradigm. Let me try another one here. One of my favorite parts about this library is the ability to create fat, ultra fat basses. In this example here, I'm using our synth ensemble saw amplified version here together with the sine waves, and it is just fat. And I highly encourage you when you try it out, if you're ever looking for really, really beautiful motion picture basses, maybe the best you can possibly get, try to use this thing here. You can also use the spot mics and dial in your own sound, but I think this is one of the closest things I've heard to like the perfect motion picture bass, particularly for epic music. Let me also, before we wrap up the video here, show you a few more things from the library. There's so much stuff. I wish I could show you everything in the library, but we're dealing with over 30 gigabytes of content. But in this case here, we also created pads. We reorganized the synthesizer ensemble in a way that we're sort of trying to create not just normal sound waves, but create waves of emotional interpretation. So the first one here was warmth, really give you that beautiful, soft, string-like sound. And let me try to play it. I'll play a little bit soft and slow in the beginning here, a little more expressive, and then I'll try to play the patch fast as well. You can actually use it in many, many different ways, but it has a beautiful sound to it. try to play something a little quicker. We also made another patch here called Strong, which has a little more sort of presence and clear character, whereas the first one is more soft. This is more trying to emulate almost like a guitar ensemble, if you will, but using synthesizers. Not that it will ever sound anything like that, but obviously with the Extreme Ensemble series, we actually have a 10-piece guitar ensemble as well. But let's try the Strong one here with the synths. And as the name indicates here on the distorted, we also did a very, very distorted version here where everyone was turning on their amplifiers to the max. In this particular patch, I'm combining with the warm and the strong as well. So 30 analog synths per note, and it's just full out blow craziness. We also tried another little experiment with the synth ensemble where we had them play arcs, just in the same fashion as we have in 8W or Imperium or Adagio and all our different libraries, these emotional arcs. We actually had the guys try to do the same thing with the synthesizer, so adjusting the volume in real time to mimic that arc. Let me just show you here for the sine waves. There's so much stuff in this library. I wish I could go through it all, but this is an example here of our drop notes. We actually did risers, drops fast. They sound like... We can drop them like this. And I wish we could just spend hours and hours together here. There's so much content to show you. The collection actually contains over 29 gigabytes of content alone. That's using lossless compression. So I think we got it down from like 80 gigabytes, something like that. So there's really a lot to do with this library. But really keep in mind that what you've just watched is only using our hall mics. You really want to watch our other video using the spot mics because they bring a whole other dimension into the library. It's nearly endless what you can do. Let me just show the spots here. This is what it looks like. So when you have the spot mics here, you can see each of these guys here are actually individual synthesizers from the spots. You can turn them on and off here. So create your own ensembles, do whatever you want. And we have a variety of new parameters here to control the synths as well. So keep that in mind that we've only been listening to the hall-based microphones here, and watch the other video where we go into the spot mics here. In many ways, these are almost more flexible than the hall synthesizers because you can really adjust and get everything right in terms of your ensemble. There might be certain sounds from certain synthesizers you like more. You can definitely isolate them and create your own ensemble as well. So yeah, watch the video, and I'm gonna conclude this one here, even though there's so many more things I could show you. Let me just show you a couple of the drones here that we actually made with the ensemble in the hall. So they were trying to play with their amplifiers and do overtones and all that stuff, and we made some cool drones out of that as well. So anyway, yeah, watch the other video with the spot mics, watch the whole Extreme Ensemble series videos. There's so many things in this library. We started with our 10-piece drum machine ensemble. Obviously we have a 10-piece analog synth ensemble here as well, but we also have our 10-piece electric guitar ensemble that also has amplifiers like I showed you here. We also have a 10-piece bass ensemble, electric basses with amplifiers too. And then we have our beautiful, crazy big take on the ultimate drummer's dream, namely 10 acoustic drum kits playing in the hall at the same time. So you essentially have the most extreme ensemble series ever made, and it's hard to put in words, so I just encourage you to watch the videos. We're trying to provide as much information as possible about this library because it's really going into new depths of sound and samples that nobody's ever ventured in before. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me just drone it out here, and thank you so much for watching again.